What if I told you Africa's future isn't about waiting for help? It's already being built by teenagers in Burkina Faso. You've heard the story over and over again, right? Africa is a continent in need of external help, relying on foreign aid, and waiting for the developed world to step in and rescue it. But here's the truth. The future of Africa is already unfolding, not in the hands of distant, powerful nations, but in classrooms in places like Bobo-Dioulasso. The students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet are not just passive learners, they are actively crafting the blueprint for a new, self-sufficient Africa. But what can they even do? Let's find out. For decades, Africa has been painted with a familiar brush: the world's largest consumer. The narrative that has been shoved down the world's throat is that Africa is dependent on Western nations for everything, from food to technology, energy to finance. The portrayal of Africa as a passive recipient of global charity and imports is so deeply entrenched that it has almost become the truth. Africa, it seemed, was doomed to perpetuate this cycle of dependency. But here's the game-changing question. What if that narrative is no longer valid? What if the future of Africa is already unfolding, and it's being shaped by the very people who have been overlooked for so long? The youth. At Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet and Bobo-Dioulasso, this isn't just a distant dream, it's happening right now. The students there aren't just sitting in classrooms, filling their heads with theoretical knowledge that won't make a difference in their communities. These students are being taught practical, hands-on skills that empower them to take charge of their futures, and in turn, the future of their continent. These aren't soft skills or academic exercises. These are the core competencies that will pull Africa out of the cycle of dependency. From raising livestock to weaving textiles, from growing crops to mastering sustainable farming techniques, these students are learning how to feed, clothe, and empower their communities. Take, for example, the practice of raising livestock. In many parts of Africa, the livestock sector is a cornerstone of the economy, providing not just food, but employment, income, and a sense of community. The students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet aren't simply learning how to raise chickens or goats. They're learning how to build a sustainable business model based on local resources. They're learning the value of animal husbandry, breeding practices, and how to turn their produce into marketable goods. With proper training, they can create local businesses that not only feed their communities, but also become exporters of agricultural products. This type of education is teaching them to see animals not just as livestock, but as assets that can help elevate their local economies. Similarly, the emphasis on weaving textiles is another example of how the students are learning practical skills that connect them to Africa's deep cultural heritage, while also preparing them to play an active role in Africa's future. Textiles, particularly in places like Burkina Faso, have always been more than just a craft. They are a powerful industry that drives local economies. By learning to weave fabrics, the students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet are gaining the skills to enter a market that has potential not just locally, but internationally. The value of African textiles, like those from the kente cloth in Ghana or the mud cloth from Mali, is recognized worldwide. These students aren't just learning how to create, they're learning how to turn their craft into an export that will bring in income and reduce Africa's reliance on imported goods. But here's the kicker. By embracing these traditional industries, Africa isn't falling behind. It's leapfrogging into the future. While many countries around the world are locked in a race to develop new technologies or rely on foreign-made products, Africa has a unique opportunity to build its future using the resources already available to it. The youth at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet are not just learning how to use these industries to sustain their communities, they are learning how to export them. Through agriculture, textiles, and sustainable practices, they are preparing to lead the charge for an African economy that produces and exports locally made goods. They are already positioned to take the continent into the next phase of economic development, where Africa isn't just a market for the rest of the world, it's a creator of wealth and opportunity. Take a moment to think about how these industries could change the game. Africa is home to some of the most fertile land in the world. For example, in Burkina Faso, over 80% of the population is involved in agriculture, and the potential for growth in this sector is immense. The students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet are learning how to harness this potential, not just to grow food, but to innovate. These students aren't just feeding themselves, they're preparing to feed the world. Through sustainable farming techniques, they're not just growing crops, they're setting the stage for Africa to become a leader in organic farming and exportation. By producing their own food and raw materials, they will be able to reduce Africa's dependence on imports, which currently drain billions from the continent's economy every year. And let's not forget the renewable energy sector. African nations are home to some of the richest natural resources in the world, including abundant sunshine and wind. The youth at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet are being introduced to renewable energy systems that will allow them to harness the power of the sun and wind, turning these resources into energy that powers homes, schools, and businesses. This type of energy isn't just about sustainability, it's about independence. By learning how to create their energy solutions, these students will help Africa move away from fossil fuel dependency and reduce its reliance on foreign energy markets. This is not just innovation, it's a seismic shift in how Africa will power its future.
The young people are not the future. The young people are the present. The present generation needs to prepare the next generation. All old people will always go where other old people went.
Africa's wealth isn't just in its raw materials, it's in its people. The innovation, creativity, and resourcefulness of Africa's youth are its most valuable assets. The students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet are showing the world that Africa doesn't need to wait for anyone to come and fix its problems. They are already taking the reins and transforming the continent's future. These students are taking the message of Africa's self-sufficiency and empowerment and turning it into a reality. They are becoming the architects of a new African economy, one where the focus is on local production, exportation, and sustainability. But here's the clincher. Economic self-sufficiency isn't just about turning a profit, it's about identity. It's about creating a sense of pride and unity that fuels the entire continent. When these students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet learn how to create, innovate, and lead, they aren't just learning skills for their future jobs, they're shaping the very future of Africa. By embracing self-sufficiency, they are developing a new identity for Africa, one where the continent doesn't just consume what others produce, but proudly creates its future. They are building an Africa where pride, unity, and self-determination aren't just abstract concepts. They are lived experiences. The economic transformation these students are leading is as much about mindset as it is about industry. By learning to value their resources, talents, and innovations, these young people are rejecting the centuries-old narrative that Africa is a continent of passive consumers. Instead, they are actively constructing a new future where Africa's youth lead the way to a self-sustaining and prosperous continent. This transformation is not only economic, it's a cultural revolution that will redefine Africa's place in the world. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Here is one thing that this youth has taught everyone present, and it's how you recite the national anthem. That's not a big deal, right? If you ask the youth of Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet what their national anthem means to them, don't expect them to recite it mechanically, as one might do in a standard school assembly. For these students, the national anthem is not just a song, it's a battle cry, a call to action, and a reflection of the Africa they are already building. They don't just sing it, they embody it. The anthem represents the values of unity, freedom, and self-determination that are guiding their generation toward economic independence and national pride. Let's break this down. For years, African nations have been caught in the crosshairs of external pressures and internal struggles. Yet, the youth at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet are beginning to see their national anthem as a declaration of Africa's unapologetic desire for self-determination. These aren't just words on paper, they're a statement of intent. The anthem embodies the struggle for independence and the ongoing fight for a continent that will no longer wait for foreign help, but will rise through its strength and unity. And for these students, that fight is far from over. It's just beginning. As they stand and sing, they're not just honoring the history of their ancestors. They are honoring the future they are building. They understand that the anthem speaks not only to their country's past, but to their role in Africa's rise. The message is clear. They are the next generation that will forge an Africa where independence isn't just a historical marker, it's an ongoing reality. They understand that the ideals expressed in the anthem, unity, progress, and sovereignty, are the very foundation upon which they will build their success and, ultimately, Africa's success. The anthem's meaning isn't just national, it's pan-African. For these students, the national anthem doesn't stop at Burkina Faso's borders. It extends to the entire continent. The anthem serves as a reminder that Africa's future is a collective effort, one that requires every country and every person to work in harmony toward a common goal. They understand that for Africa to truly rise, the entire continent must be united, not just in song, but in action. This unity isn't just about political alliances, it's about economic collaboration, cultural exchange, and a shared commitment to building a future that is free from the legacy of colonialism and exploitation. But there's more to it than just unity. The anthem represents something that these students are learning to embody daily: self-reliance. For years, Africa's story has been one of dependency on foreign aid and imported goods. But the students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet are rewriting that story. They aren't just waiting for aid to come, they are learning how to create solutions within their communities. The anthem is a rallying cry for that self-sufficiency. The message is simple: Africa can stand on its own 2 feet. The students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet understand this better than anyone else. Through their education, they are learning to provide for their communities, produce locally, and in turn, contribute to the global economy. Their understanding of the anthem's message is not theoretical. It is practical, lived, and actionable. And what about pride? For years, Africa has been portrayed as a continent in need of saving, a continent stuck in poverty, conflict, and helplessness. But these students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet aren't just proud of their national heritage. They are proud of the continent's potential. They see Africa not as a victim, but as a rising power, full of untapped resources, potential, and talent. This pride isn't just about celebrating Africa's past, it's about boldly claiming Africa's future. These students believe in an Africa that doesn't need to ask for permission to succeed. They see the anthem as a reminder of Africa's strength, its resilience, its diversity, and its unstoppable momentum. For these students, singing the anthem is more than just a school ritual. It's a moment of reflection, a reaffirmation of their commitment to building a future where Africa's voice is not just heard, but is leading the global conversation. They aren't just learning about the history of their nation, they are shaping its future. By embracing the anthem's call for unity and self-reliance, they are embodying the values that will allow Africa to take its place on the world stage as a leader, not a follower. And as they move forward, these students know that their role in Africa's rise is critical. It's not enough to just sing the anthem. They must live its message every day. They must take what they've learned, apply it in their communities, and push for a future where Africa is no longer reliant on external forces, but is a self-sustaining powerhouse in every sense of the word. This commitment to self-reliance, unity, and pride sets the stage for what is to come. The anthem represents more than just words. It's a promise, one that these students are making to themselves, to their country, and Africa as a whole. The question now is, how will the rest of the continent embrace this vision? And more importantly, how will the world react when Africa takes its place as a global leader, with its youth leading the charge? Imagine a decade from now. The students at Marie-Gabrielle-Choulet, the ones who are currently learning to raise livestock, weave textiles, and build sustainable agricultural systems, are now the leaders of Africa. They're not just occupying positions of power. They're running industries, shaping policy, and making decisions that will impact not only their communities, but the entire continent. These young minds, who have learned the importance of self-sufficiency, unity, and innovation, are about to take the reins of a continent that has long been underestimated. What will happen when Africa is controlled by this new generation? The shift is inevitable, and it will ripple through the global stage. First, let's talk about economic transformation. Right now, many African nations rely heavily on external investments, foreign aid, and imports. But when these students rise to power, they won't be looking to the West for financial bailouts or imported goods. They will have already created an ecosystem where Africa doesn't just survive, it thrives. By mastering the very industries that will fuel Africa's economic growth, agriculture, textiles, renewable energy, and local manufacturing, this new generation will build economies that are independent, sustainable, and export-driven. These students are being taught that Africa's natural resources, agriculture, renewable energy sources, and vast untapped industries are not just for the taking by external forces. Instead, they are learning how to leverage those resources to build a self-sufficient and powerful continent. For example, countries like Burkina Faso, with its rich agricultural potential, will no longer rely on imported food. These students will ensure that Africa grows and produces what it needs, and more importantly, that it has the infrastructure to export these goods globally. This means less money leaving the continent for foreign products and more economic activity staying within Africa's borders. These young leaders won't be building economies based on charity. Instead, they will harness the power of agriculture, local manufacturing, and sustainable energy practices to create thriving economies. They'll put their efforts into building industries that align with Africa's strengths, ones that leverage both the continent's natural resources and the innovative minds they've cultivated. Africa will stop being seen as a consumer continent and become a force in global trade, providing high-quality, locally produced goods that the world wants and needs. And as these students rise to power, they will not be creating economies that benefit only a small elite. These new leaders will champion policies that empower the majority. The idea of collective progress, rooted in the unity fostered by the national anthem and their education, will guide their leadership style. These leaders will push for policies that tackle poverty, improve healthcare, and create jobs for young Africans, ensuring that everyone benefits from Africa's growth. We're talking about a leadership style that is radically different from what the continent has seen in the past. A style that is rooted in the belief that sustainable development means building from the ground up, from the local farmer to the factory worker, from the student to the entrepreneur. But it's not just about economics. This new leadership will usher in a cultural and national renaissance. The sense of pride that these students are developing today, through their education and understanding of national symbols like the anthem, will drive an entirely new sense of African identity. The African youth of tomorrow won't feel the need to look to Western nations for validation. They'll know their worth. This newfound pride will be reflected in every aspect of African society, in the way African nations are viewed on the global stage, in the respect they command in international negotiations, and in the way African culture, arts, and traditions are celebrated worldwide. The shift will also have a profound effect on African geopolitics. The youth of today, empowered by a sense of self-reliance and national unity, will push for greater political cohesion among African nations. The dream of a united, prosperous Africa won't just be an ideal, it will be a reality. These future leaders will push for stronger regional trade agreements, greater political cooperation, and a unified stance in international forums. The idea of Africa as a fragmented, powerless continent will be a thing of the past. In its place will be a continent of rising global influence, standing tall on the world stage with its voice and its agenda. And the best part? This new leadership will not just be about economic or political control. It will be a transformation in how Africa views itself and how the world views Africa. These students, empowered by the education they're receiving, will carry Africa's story forward. Instead of being viewed through the lens of aid dependency or exploitation, Africa will be seen as a global leader in innovation, sustainability, and cultural pride. This is not a future where Africa is a mere player in global economics. It is one where Africa leads the way, showing the world how to create sustainable growth, unity, and prosperity. What's even more thrilling is that the ripple effects will be felt across the entire globe. The world is changing, and the youth of Africa are at the forefront of that change. As these young leaders take the helm, they will set the stage for a more balanced, multipolar world, one where the West no longer holds the monopoly on global power and influence. This new African leadership will inspire other regions to look inward, develop their solutions, and embrace their unique strengths. So, to sum this up, when these students grow up and control Africa, the continent will be transformed. Africa won't just be a global partner in a globalized world, it will be a leader. This transformation won't happen overnight, but it will happen. The shift from a dependent Africa to a self-reliant, empowered Africa is not a far-off dream. It is already in motion, and it's being driven by the very students we are talking about today. Do you think the youth will change Africa? What do you see the future Africa will have? Let us know in the comments section. Will Africa transform forever? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.